the way that it seems to satisfy what they say, that the female gaze, which I think is really cool and laudable, and they call it revolutionary for TV. But I was wondering if I could ask this from a different angle, and ask it from what it's like as the actor portraying these scenes, because how they're perceived on screen may not be the same, have those same values of female empowerment, etc., etc. When you're actually filming them. What's it like to be filming these sex scenes, and when you're asked to get naked and shoot a sex scene on Outlander?
Well, it's interesting. I think, season one was such a learning curve. Primarily, I'd never done sex scenes before. I don't think Tobias had. Sam might have on something else before, but we were all sort of, quite naive, I think, about it. And in the beginning as well, I was really trying to find my footing, as in where I could personally draw lines about what I was comfortable with and what I wasn't. And I think also it's not until you see yourself later, where, you really realize what the impact of having scenes like that out there are. Um, and, it's always this sort of fine line, because you want to honor the character and you want to honor the scenes, but you want to protect yourself. And I think that that's always a really difficult line. And especially, we started filming the show 7 years ago. I was a young, sprightly thing in my early 30s. And as you get older, it's like, I don't know. It's a hard thing. But also I think when I was starting in my 30s, I was in a very comfortable place in my life and with my body and all of those things. And I look at some of the younger actresses coming onto the show, and you worry, because we sort of set a precedent, and you think, oh, for young women in their 20s, do they feel as comfortable? Are they going to be under pressure to sort of show what we have shown? And I think it's always such a difficult, thing, because as an actor, you're not getting into this business to take your clothes off. You're getting into this business to portray characters. And sometimes that's a necessity to say something about the character, but it becomes really difficult when it becomes expected. And then it almost feels like sometimes people expect certain things from you without taking into consideration that, your family is out there, and, the local priest is watching the show or whatever it might be, and that this stuff lives forever. So I definitely, yeah, I don't know. It's still something to this day that it's always a negotiation about what is necessary for the scene and what is expected.
I think you said something interesting there about things changing from, like, in a time period. And I'm thinking also that what's changed in that time period is that in 2017, we had the massive Me Too movement. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, has that in any way changed the way you approach a sex scene?
Um, Not really on our show. I mean, for Sam and I, because I think, we learned so much after the first season that I think we sort of put in protocols after that first season that um, sort of worked for us and worked for the writers, and we sort of continued that. I think, what changed after that is, I think a lot more characters came on the show that needed to also do sex scenes. And I think that just gave a broader awareness to everyone. But I think everyone's just more aware now that it's not just this expectation that anything goes and that people have to be sensitive, which I think is so important. Um, but I think it's also, um, I've noticed it a lot more on other sets when I've gone to sets that there's a different atmosphere since the sort of Me Too movement. I think in Scotland, we sort of live in a bubble. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong or anything, but I think it's always been quite respectful with us. I don't know.
Yeah, I've said this before, but I remember that one of the things I received with dread when I signed the Outlander contract was, and here is your nudity clause, and I was like, oh geez, I've never signed one of these, and I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to. But and I was always holding out. I was thinking, any moment now they're going to write a sex scene for me. At some point it's going to happen. That's Outlander. And one of the first things that when people mention Outlander and sex scenes are kind of synonymous. And sure enough, it did get written in at one point. I think it was in season
You
4.
had a sex scene last season. Yes.
It was in season 4. And I remember in an early draft, there was like naked bodies and lots of like things that made me kind of feel very uncomfortable. But also thinking like, man, I got to get to the gym. And I had that same body shame that you have, as an actor. It's not, some of it's vanity, but also some of it's just like taking your clothes off on national television. I think it's very human to have that sense of like, I don't know if it's shame, but just embarrassment or privacy or.
It is. Yeah, and it's such a weird thing because you're constantly, or at least I constantly am torn between these two things of, well, Claire would not be going to the gym, so I should not have a gym body. And she's now a woman in her 50s, so, I should try and let that be the thing that sort of leads me. But then you have all of your own personal shit, right? You have your own personal shame and vanity and all of those things. And you try and leave those at the door. But also, that if you feel insecure, that's going to hamper your ability to lose yourself in a scene. So it's always this thing I'm constantly battling with between leaving my shit at the door and also giving myself, I guess, enough confidence to be able to walk into those scenes and not have to think about whether or not I have cellulite on my ass or, my whatever these things are that kind of run through your head. And it's, we're not unflawed people, and it's hard sometimes to also live up to the expectation of the fact that sometimes you're given very little warning of when you're going to shoot these scenes, and that's quite frustrating. Like sometimes these scenes can be thrown on you like within 2 days notice, and as a woman there are many things you have to consider, and it's sometimes biology and cycles, and I'm going to say it, like these things have a huge effect on your ability to sort of be free in these moments, and I think sometimes that's something that producers don't always consider. And
I'm more worried about my carb loading and my sugar intake and stuff. I've never had to really think about that.
I mean, we're unpacking it, right, David? So I'm just putting it all out there.
Well, I don't know if you do know this, but maybe what needs to happen is you need to have a better relationship to the VFX department, okay? Because I have it on good authority from someone who's worked on some of these Marvel films that there is a certain budget that's put aside for certain actors to do some sort of cosmetic things when they're on screen. So if you have a multi-million-dollar, say you set aside $1 million for a ex superhero to fix the hair there, facelift there, abs there, physique just so, then you don't even have to go to the gym. You don't have any of those worries about body shame, and that's what you have to do.
I just don't think we have the Marvel budget to take care of all of that.
There was enough worry on the last